Let's get into our consensus top 5 waiver wire pickups. And coming in at number 1 of the Columbus Blue Jackets was Adam Fantilli, center eligible, 36% rostered. Since the start of January, Fantilli has 16 points, 8 goals, 8 assists in 16 games. So been a point per game player since the start of January. And in 14 games since Sean Monahan got hurt, Fantilli is averaging 20 minutes and 16 seconds per game and 3.1 shots on goal per game. If you extrapolate that over an entire season, that's a 258 shot per 82 game pace. So he's been firing the pill a ton, been playing over 20 minutes a night. It's been really nice to see from Adam Fantilli as of late. In our league of record, you scooped him up a little while ago. I'm sure you're quite thrilled with that pickup right now.
Yeah, obviously the Marchenko injury is a pretty big hit to his upside in the interim. But I do think there's still enough talent there, and he's proven himself as an elite talent. And like you said, he's just going to continue to see heavy minutes with Sean Monahan's return nowhere in sight. I think last week they said he's going to miss another 6 to 8 weeks. He had a setback. So we're looking at least a month to a month and a half once we get back from the break, where Fantilli is going to continue to see all the minutes down the middle at 5v5 and on the power play. And yeah, I mean, he was great even leading up to the injury, certainly earned the promotion to the top line. And we called it out right away as just a name to keep an eye on if he did get that bump. And yeah, you can't argue with the results. Like you said, right? 14 points in 14 games, over 3 shots a game, over 20 minutes a night. So I just think he's a must own in all formats if he is somehow still available in your leagues, and a guy that you need to find a way to make room for on your roster if you're in maybe a shallower league where he hasn't been picked up yet.
I actually had him this year as my center breakout star, and it was kind of for this reason. I thought that he could do this early. I didn't see Sean Monahan being that guy off the bat, and he was. But now we're kind of seeing what Fantilli has and what made him such a high draft pick and such a high-end prospect. One thing that does scare me for Adam Fantilli, we have seen Boone Jenner return to practice or return to skating as of late. So if he comes back, we do know that Boone Jenner loves to eat ice time and is also a centerman. With that said, Fantilli's definitely kind of, solidified himself, I think, as that center one. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. And there's a reason he's our top pickup here, because there's a couple other juicy names, and it felt good to say Fantilli because I think we were all kind of on that after our boy Monahan went down from our mistress Columbus Blue Jackets. But yeah, Fantilli, fantastic pickup right now. 3 shots per game, as you mentioned, is lovely.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Boone Jenner. It's a good point. I don't think Jenner's going to supplant him on that top line. It's just worked so well with him up there. But that'll be a nice boost for the Blue Jackets as a whole to try to fill that void while Monahan's returning, and hopefully try to keep them in that playoff hunt for when Monahan is back in the lineup, because it's been one of the best stories in the league. But man, right now it's tough. No Werenski, no Monahan, no Marchenko. It's literally their 3 leading scorers. Tough sledding ahead here for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Hopefully Adam Fantilli can help keep them afloat. Let's move on to our consensus number 2 pickup, and that is Jake DeBrusk of the Vancouver Canucks, left wing, right wing eligible, 38% rostered. In 3 games since the Canucks traded JT Miller, DeBrusk is averaging 19 minutes and 45 seconds per game and has picked up 3 points, 2 goals and 1 assist and 9 shots on goal. His ice time is up more than 3.5 minutes from his first 50 games of the season. So huge usage boost since the JT Miller trade. He's been tied at the hip with Elias Pettersson. He's on the top power play unit. Lots to like about what we've seen in the early days of the JT Miller list of Vancouver Canucks. This is kind of more of the Jake DeBrusk we expected to see coming into the season, playing alongside Elias Pettersson, putting up big numbers. So Beebs, you like DeBrusk's upside moving forward, playing in this top 6 for the Canucks?
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, this is the reason they brought him in the offseason. And with that said, maybe that's why he wasn't getting the heavy minutes off the bat. He wasn't on Vancouver last year, and we saw them go quite far in the playoffs. They had something set. That's clearly blown up. And Jake DeBrusk is luckily kind of the beneficiary of it all. As you mentioned, 1930 time on ice last night against Colorado, which was fantastic, just to prove a second straight game that he kind of is the new quote unquote JT Miller out there. One thing that kind of impressed me about DeBrusk is he had a stretch just a couple weeks ago where he had 13 points in 10 games played, but out of those 13 points, 11 of them were goals. So he had 11 goals and 2 assists in 10 games with 36 shots on goal. So he was averaging 3.6 shots per game during that span. Just goes to show you what he's capable of when he's in that position. And as you mentioned, JT Miller is gone. There goes 18 minutes of ice time that needs to be filled between him and Philip Heidel. I think it's going to be, they're both just going to split it very nicely. And you might as well enjoy what comes from it. And I think if DeBrusk can keep his shot totals up, like we saw last night with the 5 shots on goal, then we're in for something nice going forward with Jake.
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it. It really does seem like he's going to be the one benefiting the most from Miller's departure. The lineup's a little bit more top heavy now. Should be locked into first line and top power play minutes. I already talked about how productive he's looked in the first 3 games without Miller. And like you said, Brock, it's the potential usage that got us excited about DeBrusk and in the preseason and really made us feel like he was definitely worth a late round flyer if he was going to get this kind of minutes. It's taken some time, but we're there now, and he's always produced well and had impressive shot volume and more limited role during his time with Boston. So I do think this is the kind of sample size that you need to take note of and jump all over if you want to kind of stay ahead of the trend in your fantasy leagues.
Yeah, and Beebs, as you mentioned, went on a bit of a heater a little while ago, and really it's been a pretty impressive run since kind of the end of November for him now. 16 goals in his last 35 games. That's a 38 goal pace. Obviously the shooting percentage is a little bit high during that stretch, 21%, but now this additional ice time can really kind of help offset some of that regression we could see in the shooting percentage, and he could be a guy that scores at a 30-plus goal pace, the rest of the season if things start clicking. It's been a bit of a quiet offensive season for the Canucks as a whole. Maybe this is the spark that they needed to kind of wake things back up. Let's move now to the blue line. We got a couple of blue liners. So again, if you've lost Zach Werenski in the short term, or you've lost Miro Heiskanen for the season, we talked about this guy a lot. We got one name we talked about a bunch, one name we haven't talked about at all. The first being Jackson Lacombe of the Anaheim Ducks, 34% rostered. We've talked about him a ton as of late. Since Christmas, Lacombe is tied for 12th among defensemen with 13 points, 3 goals, 10 assists. During that stretch, he is tied with Cale Makar, Josh Morrissey, and Vince Dunn with the 13 points. And that's also ahead of Roman Josi, Erik Karlsson, and Dougie Hamilton. He's just been sensational since the break. Additionally, he's 8th in shots on goal, averaging 2.6 per game during that stretch. And if you're in leagues that count peripherals, he's also averaging nearly 1 hit and 1.7 blocks per game. So he's an absolute category stuffer across the board. All 3 of us are super high on this guy. Is there anything else you want to add, or is it just like his own percentage really hasn't risen as much as it should have?
No, and again, it's kind of surprising because we always talk about how difficult it is to find quality production on the blue line off the wire. And it's really interesting. I just got to jump ahead a little bit, but him and Tony DeAngelo is who we have ranked next here. And we're really at a spot where there are a couple of quality options out there that can at least help you in the short term. But I agree. I think Lacombe cemented himself as the top power play option on that blue line. The shot volume has been really good for a young blue liner. Not the most productive team, so he's not going to be immune from the cold streaks, as we've already seen. I think I would prefer DeAngelo in kind of the short term, but his usage is obviously in jeopardy when Dobson returns. I wouldn't be surprised if he's kind of bouncing in and out of the lineup at that point. And Dobson announced out week to week on the 24th. Haven't got an update since, so it's tough to project when he'll be back, but he may not miss all that much time with the 2-week break coming up. So if I'm looking for someone with season-long upside, I think I'd definitely side with Lacombe. But if I'm a Dobson owner just looking for that stopgap, then DeAngelo could make a lot of sense.
Yeah, you nailed it. I have to agree. I've been big on Tony DeAngelo, but with that said, Jackson Lacombe should be like 70% owned, in my opinion, looking at some of the other defensive names that are owned ahead of him. And Brock laid it out there. He's right now putting up stats with some of the top D-men out there, yet we are somehow watching his own percentage go down some weeks. So it's absolutely insane. Lacombe, for sure, I would be looking at if I could with any of my D. But with that said, you mentioned it, D. It's kind of rare that we have an influx of good talent to choose from at this point of the year. Like 2 weeks ago, I know I was looking to drop Jake Wallman. I just kind of wanted an improvement on D in one of my leagues, and I couldn't find anything across the board. And then Drew Doughty came back, and I snuck him back on my lineup into my lineup. And now Tony DeAngelo's here, and I'm looking at Jackson Lacombe and free agents in one of the same leagues. So it's very tough when they're all there, but these guys make great selections and can definitely improve what you already have on your defensive end. But I'll focus on 32%. Tony D, he's got 4 points in 6 games played since he's joined the New York Islanders. As you mentioned, he's basically Noah Dobson for now. He's +6 during those 6 games. So for all those people who, said that his defensive game is just non-existent, he's changed something. And because of that, he's gone on to just eat ice time. He's averaging 25-26 since he's came back. The guy averaged nearly a point per game in the KHL. There was a bunch of reports about how he might have been, pushing for numbers, yada, yada. Either way, a point per game in the KHL is a point per game in any league, and that's quite impressive. We know that Tony D can bring it offensively, and it's a guy who has 3 10-goal seasons with 10 goal, 42 plus point seasons in his career. So someone that's kind of sliding into a great spot here, and someone that can steal some points for you from a position that realistically you were probably punting players for the last little bit. So yeah, I like the Tony D pickup. I think both these guys make great additions right now and could definitely help your team out.
Yeah, I mean, DeAngelo couldn't have landed in kind of a better situation in terms of trying to make an immediate impact. Obviously, that it's not just Noah Dobson, right? They've got a bunch of injuries on the blue line. They're missing 4 of their 6 original defensemen from the start of the season. So he's slid in and he's averaging 25 minutes and 26 seconds per game right now. Over his last 4 games, he's up over 26 minutes a night. I mean, he's absolutely devouring ice time. I think the one thing that's going to limit both of these guys' upside, obviously, the Islanders dead last in terms of power play conversion rate on the season, the Ducks second last. So both these teams' power plays are going to continue to struggle, especially now the Islanders without Matt Barzal. That's going to be a huge issue. But yeah, like they're both devouring ice time. They're both playing, key minutes with the best players in the team. They're both still in the top power play unit. Like even the worst power play units are going to convert, 12 to 15% of the time, and you're still going to pick up points. And these guys obviously off the wire are going to be like your 3rd, 4th defenseman. So really like the DeAngelo pickup in the short term, like you said, D. Even when Dobson gets back, I still think he's going to play a lot of ice time depending on who's all back, right? They're just missing so many bodies. It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out after the break. But so far, so good, man. Like a lot of people obviously weren't super happy with DeAngelo, signing with the Islanders, but he, from a fantasy hockey perspective, all we care about is the numbers, and so far, so good. Do you have any final thoughts here on DeAngelo and Lacombe?
No, I just kind of echoing your thoughts on it being a really good fit. And, Patrick Waugh talked about before his first game, he just told them, don't worry about the structure, just go out and play your game, which I think is perfect for DeAngelo because, we saw even in Carolina, his ice time really get capped because he had trouble kind of adjusting to that really rigid style of hockey. And let's be honest, there's enough structure in the Islanders game already. So I think it is just a really nice fit. And like you said, it'll be interesting to see what happens when they get fully healthy. And might not be someone you want to roster at that point, but in the meantime, with all the ice time that he's getting and all that power play time, certainly worth the spot.
So since DeAngelo signed with the Islanders, they have scored a couple power play goals, nothing crazy. No, just 1 power play goal still. So still the conversion rate lacking, 1 power play goal in 7 games since DeAngelo signed. So still looking to convert a little bit more with the man advantage. We shall see where that goes from here. The final name in our consensus top 5 waiver wire pickups is Tyler Toffoli, left wing, right wing eligible, 33% rostered from the San Jose Sharks. Toffoli was nicked up recently, missed 3 games in mid-January, but bookending those missed games were some really, really strong outings from the veteran winger. He has 8 points, 4 goals, 4 assists in his last 7 games, while averaging 3.0 shots on goal per game in that stretch. The ice time has also taken a jump recently, averaging 18:35 time on ice in his last 3 games, and that's something that should definitely continue now that Michael Granlund's been shipped off to Dallas. I'm sure he's not the first player that's going to get traded from San Jose either, and he's just really developed great chemistry with Macklin Celebrini, the super rookie on the top line there for the Sharks. And that's a line now with Granlund out of the picture that's going to just start to devour ice time. And I do like Toffoli moving forward. I really think that the Sharks, that top line with Celebrini can still be pretty potent offensively. And I think that, there's a lot of concern, obviously, rostering the Sharks, maybe the plus minus will take a hit, but in leagues that don't really count that, or it's not weighted quite as heavily, like in a points league or something like that, I don't really care taking the shot here on Toffoli, especially if you've got Celebrini on the roster. I think they're a decent little mini stack. We did talk obviously about the Sharks having pretty poor fantasy hockey playoff schedule, so he might not be a long-term addition to the roster, but Toffoli in the short term, I think is a nice pickup as well. And he came in number 5 overall for us. D, what do you think here about Tyler Toffoli?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who's listened to the show for the last few years know that I'm a big fan of his individual game. He's always produced well, even when kind of being limited to a more, smaller role on some contending teams. And the shot volume has always been there. I have a little bit harder time trusting him this year just because that ice time and the shot volume as a result have wavered so much. But the good news, obviously, there's a lot more ice time to go around, both at 5v5 and on the power play following the Granlund trade. That's 21 minutes a night gone from that lineup. 4 shots on goal, just under 19 minutes of ice, and 2 points for Toffoli in that first game of the post-Granlund era. And I do think he's going to need to continue to see that kind of usage, which is totally plausible. But just given how this team is going to struggle to own the puck at 5v5. But again, it's another short-term trend that's definitely worth jumping on given his consistent production over the years. And unlike in recent years, for once, there's really no threat of him being shipped off to absorb a smaller role on a contender at the deadline. He's locked into a 4-year deal with a full no trade. So in a really nice spot to help you out. And then maybe someone you want to look at cutting come playoff time, as you said, Brock.
You guys nailed it. I actually had to double check. Brock wasn't reading my notes earlier. So perfect, boys. I think Toffoli is just a lesser version of DeBrusk right now, just strictly due to the team he's playing for and the people around him. But other than that, a lesser version of DeBrusk is still quite solid off the waiver wire. So I agree with D. Take the hot hand if you can and let it work because he's going to get ice time.
So the names that just missed our top 5, we'll just roll through them really quickly. First being Ken Johnson of the Columbus Blue Jackets, 22% rostered. He's currently on an 8-game point streak, picking up 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points during that stretch. If you look back even further, he's got 17 points in his last 21 games. Another guy that's just going to continue to see an uptick in usage while the Blue Jackets are so banged up. This kind of worked out nicely because a lot of like our guys that we talk about all the time just narrowly missed our top 5. So we still get to bring them up in some capacity, just don't get to talk about them for 25 minutes straight. Nick Schmaltz in number 2. He's got 5 goals, 7 assists, 12 points in his last 13 games, just continuing to do Nick Schmaltz stuff. Alexei Protas of the Washington Capitals, up to 39% rostered. Went a little bit cold for a little bit there in the middle of January, but it's now picked up 9 points in his last 8 games. Just continues to convert at an unbelievable clip. Just kind of defies logic at this point. 11 goals, 8 assists, 19 points in his last 22 games. He's shot nearly 30% during that stretch. We did finally see him get bumped up to power play 2. Who knows how long that lasts, but that bodes well for Beebs' bold prediction that we could see Protas get some power play time in the second half of the season. So that's awesome. And then Jonathan Drouin of the Colorado Avalanche was the final one to just narrowly miss our top 5. 35% rostered for the Colorado Avalanche. Since returning to the lineup, he's been pretty solid for the Avs. Dating back to January 9th, he has 14 points, 3 goals, 11 assists in his last 13 games, playing over 19 minutes a night. So pretty deep top 6 there for the Avs. And Drouin has factored in quite a bit recently. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, I'm Brock Segan, got Dylan DeBrusk, Michael Bondi. We are going to be doing some content throughout the 4 Nations break. Probably just going to have a little bit more fun with it. Some little fun fantasy games we're going to do, really some shorter episodes, some YouTube stuff. So keep an eye out for that during the 4 Nations break. Other than that, enjoy the hockey. I know I'm going to be enjoying my little bit of time off. You guys will as well. Stay safe out there. We'll see you guys back here shortly.